there was a time when humans, us, and not just us, but even our ancestors, uh, were hunter-gatherers, and they did not have an organized society as we have now. Now, how did they coalesce that society into a functioning entity that there wouldn't be any conflicts, and conflicts could be resolved, and you could have a compass to lead you and basically um, not destroy the society you live in. Now, that used to be possibly when we don't know when humans or our ancestors developed language that was language, even symbolic language, that we were able to communicate and express ideas, express and organize functions, etc. But there's a study that was released not too long ago, last week or the week before. It is from it was published in December the 5th. The original study is in the description if you guys want to have a look at it. And you guys, basically, the study says that storytellers promoted cooperation among hunter-gatherers before the advent of religion. Now, the title itself is a little bit misleading. I will share it so you guys can have a look at what I am talking about. So I'm not talking about stuff, but it is this study. So it's published in Nature Communications. I have the link in the description. You guys can check it out. As always, I always have the actual study there. Now, and this article has a few, I won't say inaccuracies, but it has a few details which I will discuss. Now, storytelling promoted cooperation in hunter-gatherers prior to the advent of organized religion. See what's missing from the title? It says it here. We're talking about organized religion, not belief systems, which is totally different. Hunter-gatherers did have a belief system, possibly going back to H. erectus. We don't know. But at least Neanderthals, H. sapiens neanderthalensis, did have evidence for a belief system. They put their, how do I say this without triggering the demonetizing bot for my those who have kicked the bucket. I have to use this because I have to use puns because the bot is not very intelligent. So the members that, quote, kicked the bucket, unquote, were in graves. I can say that word. It won't trigger it. And with goods that were put in graves. So that is organized. That is not an organized religion, but that is a belief system. Now, this study, which showed research showed that hunter-gatherer storytellers were essentially promoting cooperation and egalitarian values before comparable mechanisms evolved in large agricultural societies. Organized religions came about because of large agricultural societies, such as moralizing high gods, but they did not need moralizing high gods, the hunter-gatherers. They had their moral compass was already tuned to not commit crimes. And I mean crimes like putting people in graves. You know what I mean? Like, the level of censorship that YouTube now does, I have to use all my vocabulary, which is quite vast. But I only want to use English. I could use a whole lot of other languages, but I'll just try and stick to English and try to use as many synonyms as I can remember. Because after all, I'm doing this live. I'm not getting my thesaurus out and my synonyms thing. So So yeah, the storytellers were also more popular than even the best foragers. Well, in this particular study group, yes, well, storytellers in general are more popular. They are entertainment. They are not the working class, as you could call them. They are, as you would say, they are they're the ancient equivalent of television. So yes, and being the moral equivalent of television, you know what happens. You have the novellas, you have the soap operas, you have drama, you have um, everything. So um, so yeah, and they had a greater reproductive success from this group, and were more likely to be cooperated with by other members of the camp, according to research published today in Nature Communications. Okay, the links in the description. Excuse me. The research is led by Daniel Smith, Andrea Miliano, Lucio Vinicius from the University College London's Department of Anthropology, and funded by, well, it doesn't matter who was funded it, based their findings on a study of the Acta, an extant, not extinct, extant, wide range, hunter-gatherer group descended from the first colonizers of the Philippines more than 35,000 years ago. So these are modern-day hunter-gatherers, with everything that comes with this statement. They are modern day hunter gatherers. They are not isolated. They live in the Philippines. That is very important. They asked three elders to tell them stories. Now, this is important. They asked three elders, the elders, to tell them stories they normally told their children and each other, resulting in 4 stories narrated over 3 nights. Okay, they found that the stories were about humanizing natural entities such as animals, celestial bodies, promoting social and cooperative norms to coordinate group behavior. So the stories were moralistic. It evolves around how to keep people entertained as well as threading um, a narrative. But you can say it's a narrative throughout to keep the group happy and cool. But it would be subtle to the people who are listening to them. Like most modern day, it's not propaganda. It's like storytelling is in general. You're the fairy tales. Fairy tales have a moralistic thread throughout them, even though they can be exciting, they can be tragic, they can be whatever. The Greek tragedies, the Greek not just tragedies, the comedies, the Greek comedies, which weren't very comedic, but that's what they're called, etc. They all had these threads of what they want to communicate ultimately. So it's, of course, they would have these threads. It's not nothing normal, nothing out of the ordinary. We still have them even in our non-hunter-gathering societies. One about it tells a story. One about the male sun falling out with the female moon. This group reversed the roles. I've seen the female sun, and the male moon. So these hunter-gathering societies reversed the roles of the celestial bodies that are visible before settling the differences over who should illuminate the sky by agreeing to share the duty, one during the day and the other during the night. The story promotes sex equality, cooperation between the sexes, which is common among foreign societies. Now, this is a little bit very misleading. When it says it promotes sex equality, it doesn't mean equality of outcome, equality of work, because each member of hunter-gathering societies have their own role. Normally, the male hunters being stronger, especially going back into, say, the pre-agricultural phase, the Paleolithic period, even the early Neolithic, when before the advent of agriculture, the animals you needed to hunt, you needed strength, you needed to carry them back, you needed strength. So generally, this is generalizing. Generally, the females were less physically apt to um, to partake in such strenuous activities. They were more so apt than later later agricultural societies, females, because in agricultural societies, especially the early ones before the advent of the plow, for example, and with the HOE, because if I say the word, it'll be taken out of context by the bot. So it's HOE, which required extreme manual labor and force to do that. The equality in terms of physical work became exasperated in the agricultural societies, but in hunter-gatherers, they were, yes, females. For example, I'll give you an example of the Australian Aborigines to counteract this. Stephen Jay Gould studied the Warrinja tribe, if I'm not mistaken. This coming from my university days. I read the book. I have the book, in fact, where it showed the differentiation between gender roles in terms of work. The males would generally, and the late teen boys, which would had enough strength, would go out hunting further afield, which take a lot of energy to bring back the game, kangaroos, etc., emus, be quite heavy loads, while the females, the younger children, the elderly would fan out in an area quite large, in fact, could be up to one to 1.5 kilometers in a straight line, or even further, 2 kilometers. It's a side catchment of that area, of that camp, and they would forage. They would catch small game. So that's hunting. The females would hunt. They would catch small game. They would pick up plants, tubers, etc. All they were the foragers, and but they were generally equal in terms of where the standings of the society. You would have, of course, a de facto leader, possibly a strategist that knew the hunting areas quite well. He could be even the elderly, and he would have told stories to entertain the camp while they were around the campsite eating, and just before they went to bed, etc. So that's basically what the equality of the sexes means, not what modern type of equality means. And of course, that type of equality, yes, and of course cooperation, because without cooperation, the tribe, because you're forgetting these are tribal societies, extended families. Basically, they would have been each small group would have been very related to one another. So that's more or less what would happen. So the UCL studies showed that about 70% of the sample of the 89 stories from 7 different hunter-gathering societies, it's talking about 7 different groups of this general, what are they called again? The Agta. They've split up the societies into different tribes. Reinforced and regulated social behavior. There's a link to what means social and behavior. Yeah. These stories appear to coordinate group behavior, to facilitate cooperation by providing individuals with a social information about the norms, rules, expectations of a given society. Yes, the storytellers would basically just keep reinforcing their legends, remind people to behave. It's what later on modern. Yeah, you can see the parallels that they're trying to draw. What modern organized religions are trying to do. So yes, that's the parallels I take from this. Yes, but from organized religions, not from religion. I already said that. So consistent with this interpretation, the Agta camps, tribes, small tribes, with a greater proportion of skilled storytellers possessed increased levels of cooperation. Almost 300 members of 18 Agta camps, 18 tribes, were also asked to choose who would they most likely lived with skilled storytellers nearly twice as likely to be nominated with less skilled individuals. Now, there's a thing here that I went and looked at the thing, and the study is a little bit flawed. I couldn't find how old the storytellers were, because they go on to say that they potentially, because they received increased social support in return for telling stories, the study found that these skilled storytellers had an average of 0.053, half a child more than the non-skilled storytellers, demonstrating the reproductive benefits of a good storyteller. Or because it mentions above that it was an elder that were the storytellers who had children, etc., compared to an inexperienced storyteller who possibly didn't have children or just had, for that mind, one or two, who knows. If they average out them over the course of that storyteller's life, who gets more experience until he gets to the original one, the eldest storyteller, who would have been, yes, received increasing social support. That also leads me to believe that the storytellers are elderly, which he goes on to say he asked 3 elders to tell stories. This article, and also the actual study. This is basically what the study is telling you. And that's where I find it a bit inaccurate. It could be better done. That's what I'm saying. It's a little, I won't say sloppy, but it's lacks the rigor that I would expect. But if I expect a lot of rigor, and I make no apologies for it. That's how we get to perfection. That's how these storytellers, the ones that get increased social support and have more children, etc., got there. They expected. They achieved perfection. So yes. And also, I'm nearly getting to an elderly stage, but not really. The author stated that the storytellers may have been pivotal in organizing human social behaviors by promoting cooperation, spreading cooperative norms, and representing punishment for norm breakers. Yes, so they sort of put the fear of into you. But there's something that I read from the article, the actual study, is that it doesn't say it here, but they found that the camps that had the most storytellers were the ones that were more cooperative, and in that they also got more storytellers to want to go there. So it's sort of a self-fulfilling circle, or whatever you call it. I can't remember the name for it, but it basically says that the more storytellers you have, the more cooperation you have, the more storytellers you want to live there. So the more cooperation you'll have, the more storytellers you'll have. The way they phrased it in the study is a bit weird, but that's how I got it. But I fail again in the study to show how old the storytellers was. Article gives us a clue. I need to have a drink. My mouth's drying up. So yeah, how old they were, but they were elderly. If they had any other specialities, were they retired? Were they good hunter gatherers, and were they good? They were good hunters, so they were they friendly? Were they how was their the storyteller's personality per se? It doesn't say anything in the article itself, not the article, the study itself, because it's important. If you have a storyteller that has a very crappy personality, he would not be as well looked on as someone who's bubbly, who is enthusiastic, and so on, as a storyteller. So there's a few less rigorous details that they could have gotten into, but that's about it. So So yeah, and in concluding, hunter-gatherer religions do not have moralizing gods. No, but they don't need to. And yet they are highly cooperative towards the whole community. This sort of proves that you do not need moralizing gods to have a high morality. And say, for example, that um, um, putting people in graves is wrong, and stealing is wrong, and because it's already innate with the society. It would break up the society if they were becoming, if they did that. And the storytellers just storytelling, the storytellers just reinforce that behave, children, and so on, or else we will perish. It's a life or it's a struggle to survive. I can say the D word, so sorry about that, guys. Thus, storytelling in hunter-gatherers was a precursor to more elaborate forms of narrative fiction, such as moralizing high gods, common in post-agricultural population, says Andrea Miliano, the author of the paper. As I said, they drew parallels with the organized religion in the sense that they are basically reinforcing the norms and reminding the norms of that in that specific society. But this study, again, is only applicable to the actor. I'm sure that if other studies were made to, say, the Amazon, the San people, I think the San people in the Southern Africa could still be studied. I don't know how sedentary they have become, but the Aborigines, unfortunately, no, they have all become settled. But there might be some. There's still some elders that could remember some of the islands between Papua New Guinea and Australia. They might still, or even in the South Pacific Islands, the Guinean Islands, say New Britain, New Ireland, etc. There are still some tribes there that they could tap to get some anthropological data. So yes. Well, I ended here. That's about it. Now I can address the Torres Strait Islanders. Thank you, Archaeology. That's the ones. Thank you, man. How are you? How are you, dude? And everyone, how are you, Davey? How are you? Oh, Maddie, how are you, sweetie? Malefus, how are you? Who else? Well, I hope you all are fine. Carlos David, always a pleasure, man. Always a pleasure. Ruben, Lord of Cancer, how are you? God, I can't remember your name. Ruben, I think it is. I apologize. I'm bad at names. So, Levi. That's it. I remember now. Sorry, man. Levi. Doesn't matter. So, yeah. Let's see. So, I suppose is our storytelling. Sort of. I'm not completely an elder yet, but I'll get there. Not far from that. So yes. Anyway, thank you for coming along. I'm going to end it here. 23 minutes enough. I won't go on too much because it's a bit boring. So thank you all, and see you next time. I have to do a video that the Sargon gave to me about Neanderthals, and this Australian director that has the most way out theory of Neanderthals, and I'm going to work on it this week. So stay tuned. Okay, guys. See you till next time.